Hey, it's Rebecca Lieb.
And I'm Jason Horton.
And we are Ghost Town, a show about weird history, hauntings, unexplained events, true crime, and all kinds of bizarre phenomenon the world over.
From unsolved murders to haunted manors.
Satanic panic to internet mysteries.
Buy a ticket to our abandoned amusement park.
A VIP ghost pass to our haunted club?
No.
Bottle service.
We have new episodes of Ghost Town every Wednesday and Friday, and you can find Ghost Town wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome, friends. This is Historical AF. I'm Keena.
I'm Howard.
And I'm Jess Story.
We're some history podcasters here to deliver some morbid and historical nuggets you never knew you needed in your ear holes. This is Inventions Part 2.
Yes.
Da-da-da. I'm so excited. If you guys don't remember who this is, it's Plotting Through the Presidents. They are back.
Thank you for having us back.
Yes, thank you. It's good to be back.
We thought you'd never call.
Yeah.
Of course I would. It just dawned on me. I was like, presidents have invented things. To the Twitter I go.
I'm glad that's worked out.
And in my story, I mentioned presidents, I think like 4 times, and I did that for you.
Goodness. Uh-oh.
It was a happy accident, but I was like, it fits.
Howard knows how to make it work.
So yeah, Tim Gunn taught me a long time ago how to make it work.
So remind everybody about your podcast and what have you been up to since the last time you were here?
Of course. Yeah, we co-host a podcast called Plotting Through the Presidents. And we've got 2 bingeable seasons out now where we take deep, irreverent dives into lesser-known stories about the early American presidents and founders and their families. We dig into myths and mysteries and scandals and just kind of bring some of those weird personalities to life.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I sit there and I listen because I'm not privy to these stories ahead of time. So I am the surrogate to the audience and I just take in the stories as they come.
Yeah, Jess brings out the best in me and asks the right questions.
Or the worst.
And adds a much needed perspective to everything.
Why, thank you, love.
Aw, I love that. You guys are adorable. My husband probably would never podcast with me, but it's okay.
Oh, no, I was roped in a little bit.
I mean, you suggested yourself at the same time.
We did think about other co-hosts for a little while.
Yeah.
And then finally we're like, let's just make it you.
We have a Discord channel for Patreon and somebody said something earlier about like, if you ever need a break, just have Zeke do it. And I was like, well, that would be hilarious. And now I need to figure out a way to rope him into this for maybe like a car episode where he can be like my translator because I know nothing about mechanics. And he can build a car without... Listen, he bought this car, he gutted it, and then just rebuilt it with stuff he made. Like, he would weld all the parts together to make new parts, and then wired it all without any guide or instructions. And
I don't know how to do that.
That's such a cool skill set.
That is so cool. And I don't even have that function in my brain. I'm still trying to figure out Lego sets. You know, like my 6-year-old and I are trying to figure out how to follow those directions, let alone weld things. Oh, wow.
He uses parts of his brain I don't think exist in mine, but it just blows my mind. I'm like, I don't know what that is, but I'm really impressed.
Yeah, I think you should have him on and he'll like be just like Marissa Tomei and my cousin Vinny and like just spouting all these facts and like it'll be awesome.
Yeah, I need to make that work.
It sounds like he might be an inventor.
Yes. Yeah. It's really funny because he has this little Ford Ranger and he gutted it too and made a race car. And so he'll go to the track and he'll just kind of like put up in this old Ranger. It's like an 86. And then people will be like, oh, I'm going to beat it because they have these new cars, have all this turbo and stuff. And then he just leaves them at the finish line and people's mouths are agape and everybody's like, what the fuck is in that thing? And it's so funny to me.
I built it.
Yeah. And I always try to get a camera of everybody at the same time being like, what the hell just happened? Because it's so fast. But
oh my gosh.
I just I don't understand it. I appreciate it, but I don't understand. I can't build anything. I don't know.
No, me neither. I can talk.
I would like to weld though. Fire seems fun, but other than that,
I would burn myself so fast. I don't think I'd be good with anything that spewts fire.
Yeah.
We put the little middle Hanukkah candle back, and you get the bottom of it like hot, and then that makes it stick in, and that's almost like welding.
I learned that trick from many, many generations of Jews.
Yeah.
How to get that candle to stick. Yeah, that's the closest I get to efficiency with fire. I don't even do fire in the fireplace. Howard has to do that.
It's funny you bring up the menorah. My sister just officially became Jewish. She just converted.
Last time we were on, you said she was on that route.
Yeah, she's official now. So
congratulations to your sister.
I get to go to my first temple thing. Service. I don't know.
I'm a bad Jew in that way. I do all the food and the holidays, but I don't go to temple.
There's so many of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. We're constantly eating.
We just do the like high ones, or like the fun.
We do the main ones,
the big food ones.
The big food ones.
Yeah, I do dig that there's a lot of food and wine.
Yes,
a lot of wine and bottle.
Wine.
Yeah,
on my glass of it.
Yeah, we are drinking the Federalist wine with Lincoln on the front, and it's a red blend.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, they make some good wines.
We drank the Federalist last time too, right?
We might have, maybe.
Yeah, I think that we did.
I love a good theme. Well, do we want to just jump into it and talk about some presidents?
Hey, it's Rebecca Lieb.
And I'm Jason Horton.
And we are Ghost Town, a show about weird history, hauntings, unexplained events, true crime, and all kinds of bizarre phenomenon the world over.
From unsolved murders to haunted manors.
Satanic panic to internet mysteries.
Buy a ticket to our abandoned amusement park.
A VIP ghost pass to our haunted club?
No.
Bottle service.
We have new episodes of Ghost Town every Wednesday and Friday, and you can find Ghost Town wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, let's do it. All right. So for inventions, I want to talk about a president who invented some things. Kind of. I'm talking about Thomas Jefferson.
What do you mean he kind of invented some things?
You'll see.
Oh.
Third president of the U.S., author of the Declaration of Independence, and a hugely hypocritical slave owner with a secret family. Yeah. He was such a bastion of contradictions that the historical consensus at this point seems to be, well, yes, he did good things, and he was also terrible, and that's why he's just like America. So, yeah.
Interesting, yeah.
He kind of invented a couple of things that we'll get to, but he wasn't so much an inventor as he was a guy with a lot of time on his hands to tinker and design things for his own convenience. Like, if you walked into his home, Monticello, you wouldn't look around and say, wow, look at that invention. But you might say, what have you done? And why? So Monticello, it was kind of like Rick Moranis' house in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, with the Rube Goldberg like toaster thing and gadgets everywhere. And it was also kind of like Alicia Silverstone's closet in Clueless.
Oh, okay, yeah.
He had this cool clothes rack that one visitor described like this. In a recess at the foot of his bed was a horse with 48 projecting hands on which hung his coats and waistcoats, and which he could turn around with a long stick, a knickknack that Jefferson was fond of showing with many other little mechanical inventions.
Huh. I don't know. I just think of like Frankenstein for some reason. I don't know. His home is Frankenstein pieces, but out of furniture.
He was a bit of a mad scientist. Yeah. Like this thing, like this, it would probably look like a coat rack with a bunch of sticks, but I'd like to think it looked like a real like horse up on two legs with like 48 human hands coming out of it.
Like a Kierkegaard kind of.
Yeah. Yes. So if you do art for this episode, like keep that in mind. That's what I want to see.
I got to make that nightmare fuel for everybody to visualize.
And also, it was at the foot of his bed, and it's like, I don't know, how do you?
That is horrifying.
Welcome to my home. Yeah. Let me show you.
I don't even sleep well when our desk is messy. I can't imagine. Yeah. I can't imagine hooks coming out of the front of my bed. That's just.
Yeah.
I think he probably liked nightmares.
Probably.
Maybe he also had French doors that when you opened one of them, the other one would open automatically. And people's minds were blown by the sorcery. How did he do it?
It's Elijah.
I guess in the 1950s, when they were remodeling Monticello, they found a rod and pulley system underneath the floorboards.
What?
Oh.
Yeah, Bill Bryson talks about this in his book At Home. And he says, like, the biggest takeaway from historians at Monticello about this was, why would Jefferson spend the time and money building something so elaborate that doesn't really do that much? That's just how he worked.
What was it exactly? What was he pulling? What was the pulley doing?
It was French doors. You opened one, and the other one opened automatically.
Oh, so the pulley system went under the house.
Yeah, it went underneath the floorboards. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And the work, all that went into that, just for half of a door to open, I don't know.
Well, I sometimes think about the accomplishments I would make if I didn't watch television. Do you know what I mean? When you don't have the certain, mind-numbing entertainment, the things that you can accomplish.
If we didn't watch TV,
so much more with my life,
and we had hundreds of slaves, we could,
that's
really the key to his free time and everything he did.
Good point.
Yeah. But no, you got a point about Netflix. I mean, he spent his time on this kind of stuff. He was so bad at money. I mean, he was great at spending it, but he was always in debt. And it doesn't make sense. He was really good at math. He understood the concept that things cost money, but he just couldn't reconcile that idea with ever not having what he wanted.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't know that about him.
Oh, yeah. Terrible. Like, if he didn't have the free labor, and I mean, it's free, but he did have to pay, I guess, to like feed them and different things. But it was still like he wasn't paying labor wages. He had these people to do all these things. And if he didn't have that, it's like, I imagine a business like a restaurant where people stop coming and there's no money coming in for like a year, but you still have all these employees and you're the boss and you're just like, okay, let's make the register walk. And that people have to build that to happen. I don't know.
That was a very interesting analogy. I just have to say,
that's how my mind works.
It took an unexpected turn. I didn't expect
it. But it sounds like he was pretty entitled. I mean, he felt entitled to that free time.
Well, yeah, for sure. And he felt like whatever he thought up was important enough to act on and to divert resources to the detriments of whatever else.
Yeah. He probably was that guy. Like, I am a genius. He's going to be awesome. Just totally do it.
And his family told him that from birth, so they raised him as a genius. And he remember his first memory. What was his first memory of a slave lifting him off a pillow onto a horse or something? Yeah,
basically. I think putting him onto a horse on a pillow. That's his first memory.
Pillow. Yeah. So, I mean, the slavery was just ingrained in him.
Yeah. He never had to
get on a horse by himself.
I mean, eventually I think he got on a horse by himself.
I don't know.
Picture it didn't happen.
One cool machine that he didn't invent, but he did improve on, was a polygraph. Not the lie detector kind. He would have lit that up though. This polygraph, it was a machine that attached to your pen and it made an exact copy of what you were writing.
That's really cool.
Right? Nice.
I need that in life. I still need that.
I mean, we have like computers and stuff, but when you're writing with your hand, I guess.
Oh yeah, that's true.
It'd still be cool to use
Yeah, it copies, it's writing next to you as you're writing. Yeah. So he could write to all of his ladies and all of his important people.
And he wouldn't have to, I mean, they always kept like a draft copy of their letters.
Oh, that's why.
So this would save the time of doing that by hand.
And that's where they're saying, here's this for your records. Have a copy of this for your records.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where that came from. Mm-hmm. Look into that.
Yeah. Some things he designed for both like convenience and to avoid actually seeing the people that he enslaved. Because, it can be awkward when you have company over and they notice that the people serving them look a lot like you. And they did notice that.
I don't understand.
Oh, I'm sorry. Some of his slaves were his own children.
Oh, yes, I see. That's what you're implying. Okay.
And there was a strong resemblance to the point where people commented on it.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Yeah. But Jefferson built dumbwaiters on both sides of his fireplace to have wine sent up from the cellar. And he built this lazy Susan type thing so that his slaves could bring everyone dinner. They'd go up this steep little staircase to a little nook. They'd put the dinner on this thing. They'd turn it and it would come out the other side on the dining room. And then the guests could put their dirty plates back on it and turn it around like magic.
That reminds me of those little places you put your urine in a doctor's office where you put it in and you flip it around and then you flip it back and it was given to the lab. Do you remember those?
I don't think I've ever done that.
You haven't ever given urine to a lab through a wall?
Yeah, I have.
I
Is
have
that a woman only thing?
I
mean,
can
is that-
relate to that.
Is this
Yeah.
the
I
shit
have-
women have to go through?
I have given urine to plenty of like doctors' office people, and it's always been very awkward. It's never involved a wall and a slidey thing. No.
There's a little lazy Susan with a door, and you put it in, right, Kina? This has happened to you.
Yeah.
And you close it, and then you walk away, and you just hope the right people get it on the other side.
Okay, there are two possibilities. One, every doctor's office I've been to has had this, and I didn't know about it.
That might be a possibility.
That's probably the only possibility, because every time I've come out of that little bathroom, like awkwardly, like, where do I put this?
Yeah, that's embarrassing. I don't think they make those much anymore because I've definitely had the awkward walk of shame as well, the urine. But yeah, maybe Jefferson spurred that invention because it was really nice. Although it was really nerve-wracking for me because I would keep checking, like, is it still there? Is it still there? I would look because I felt like, did the lab get it? And sometimes it was gone, sometimes it was there. And I just walked away hoping that whoever was supposed to get it. But I have anxiety.
Are you sure you weren't at a bank?
I'm pretty sure, unless some bank teller somewhere has my urine.
Speaking of spinning things, there's one invention that I really want to talk about today.
Uh-huh.
Thomas Jefferson is credited with inventing the swivel chair.
Feel like I've heard that, but I don't know specifics.
I've heard this lots of places too, and it's even mentioned in Downton Abbey. Yeah, the Dowager Countess is sitting on her chair, and it like suddenly moves. She almost like eats shit. and she says, like, good heavens, what am I sitting on? And the guy says, a swivel chair. And she says, oh, another modern brainwave. And he says,
I like your impressions here.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
Maggie Smith and I have a past. I kind of picked it up on it. And he says, not very modern. They were invented by Thomas Jefferson. And she says, why does every day involve a fight with an American?
That sounds more like some kind of Muppet than
Most of my impressions evolve into Muppet.
It's a Muppet.
Yeah.
Who was it's Grover? You're doing Grover.
It could be Grover. It's Maggie Smith or Grover. It's a fine line if you listen to her.
Tomato.
Miss Piggy. That was Miss Piggy there.
My grandmother on my mom's side was a Fraggle, and sometimes that comes out.
I love Fraggles.
Yeah.
Fun fact, when I was a tiny human, my nickname was Boober because of the Fraggles.
Aw, that's awesome.
That is sweet. Boober. Oh, I'm kind of happy for you that didn't carry too far.
Yeah, I only have one friend from school, like growing up, that remembers that, and she still brings it up. I'm pretty sure a couple of years ago. Yeah, it was like 4 years ago. She gave me a Boober Fraggle dog for my birthday.
Oh,
I was like, you're never gonna let it die, huh?
yeah.
Nope.
There's definitely old friends that bring up things. I'm like, I can't believe you remember that. Number one, number two. It's called a past for a reason. You know, like
Yeah. There's a certain level of friend where if you're not that close with them, and I feel like if they keep bringing up the same thing, like every time you see them every like year or two, you just gotta like step back and fade away.
Yeah.
That's their way of saying, I think I've been that friend to people, actually.
Yeah,
no,
Yeah,
Howard.
yeah. So I've always wondered if this swivel chair story was true. Like, did he really invent it? So I dug into it, and the answer is maybe.
Like
So-
history on so many levels.
Yes. In Philadelphia, right now, at the American Philosophical Society, there's a Windsor chair. Jefferson called them stick chairs. And this chair was modified with an iron spindle and some casters from curtains so that it could turn or swivel. The society got that chair from a guy who got it from Jefferson's daughter.
Oh.
And that guy says that Jefferson's daughter said that Jefferson had it especially built in 1775, and it was the very chair upon which Jefferson's ass spun as he wrote the Declaration of Independence.
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah.
Based on a rumor, a big rumor.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know if it's true. We don't know about the timeline. What we do know is that Jefferson spent some years in France not long after that, And we know that in 1790, he and George Washington both ordered swivel chairs from a New York cabinet maker named Thomas Burling. And these were like nice leather barrel chairs with like round seats. You couldn't see the mechanism at all. Washington called it an uncommon chair, and he used it throughout his presidency. He took it home to Mount Vernon. So there's a few possibilities. Maybe Jefferson invented it in 1775, and then he shared his design with this Burling guy 15 years later. Maybe he didn't invent anything in 1775, but he saw something similar in France when he was there, and he brought the design back with him and had this Burling guy make some, in which case he just brought the idea to America. Or Thomas Burling designed these chairs on his own, and Jefferson's Declaration chair was really built later. Someone made up that connection maybe to increase its value. That could be the real reason he's credited with inventing the swivel chair. I'll leave it up to you guys to decide what really happened.
Yeah, let us know what you think. That makes a lot of sense, though. I think a lot of things in history were kind of exaggerated to give it more value.
And he even gave stuff of his own value. Like he gave like a little writing desk thing to like a son-in-law or daughter or nephew or something. And he said, I wrote the Declaration of Independence on this. And to some people, it's going to be like a sacred relic. So take care of it kind of thing. So if his daughter sold it years after his death, she might have been thinking, I know how to get some money out of this. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes the most sense.
Yeah. The best part of Jefferson's chair, though, is that his enemies gave him shit for it.
Because people kept falling off.
Yeah, a lot of people died. It was
there were some casualties.
They got off the foot of his bed where they were looking at the clothes rack thing, and they just slid across the floor into the dumbwaiter, decapitated.
Oh, God. There's definitely some Final Destination stuff.
And it kept happening. In 1796, when he was running for president against John Adams, one of Adams's supporters put out a pamphlet called, and I got to take a deep breath here, "The Pretensions of Thomas Jefferson to the Presidency Examined and the Charges against John Adams Refuted, addressed to the citizens of America in general and particularly to the electors of the President."
That's a title?
That's the title of this pamphlet. And this pamphlet
what was in the pamphlet?
Is there room for anything?
Page after page of Thomas Jefferson sucks.
Oh.
Yeah. The author...
Old burn.
Yeah. The author, William Loughton Smith, he was a representative from South Carolina. His angle was that Jefferson fancied himself a philosopher who would rather spend his time like thinking and doing science rather than taking decisive action like a leader. And that's why he would make a bad president. He wrote, "What respect would the officers of government entertain for a president whom they should find on waiting on him for instructions, busily engaging in impaling a butterfly or contriving with assiduous perseverance an easy chair of new construction? Would not an attention to these littlenesses make him the ridicule of the world?" An easy chair is in italics. And there's a footnote, an original 18th century footnote. And that's where the gold is.
Oh, no. That wasn't the gold? There's more gold? Oh, gosh.
No.
Oh, the suspense. It's killing me in my swivel chair.
The footnote says, "Who has not heard from the secretary the praises of his wonderful Whirligig Chair, which had the miraculous quality of allowing the person seated in it to turn his head without moving his tail?" Yeah.
I don't know what my favorite part is. The fact that they call it a Whirligig chair.
A Whirligig Chair, yeah.
Or the thoughts of turning a torso isolated from a head.
And the thoughts that he brings this up as if Jefferson is like, "Guys, have you seen my Whirligig Chair?" And then there's one more sentence of the footnote. He goes after his gadgets. The rest of the footnote says, "Who has not admired his fertile genius in the production of his Epicurean sideboard and other gimcrackery?"
Why don't we use that anymore? Gimcrackery.
No.
I had to look it up. And like 80% of me thought it's not going to be a word. It is.
Where did you look it up? In your Oxford dictionary?
I didn't, because those are heavy. No, I just looked it up online.
Why do we have all 20 volumes of those then? Because
my computer's sitting on 2 right now to lift it up a little bit. I love it. I love having it. And I look forward to the time when our kids are in college and I can just leaf through it. Gimcrackery means cheap, showy things that are like gaudy and tasteless.
Oh.
And that's our Jefferson.
Oh, like kitsch, kind of?
Yeah, sure.
Gimcrackery.
Gimcrackery.
New favorite
Yeah.
word.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it.
So I'm going to wind down here with the one thing that everyone agrees that Jefferson actually did invent. It's called the mold board of least resistance.
Oh.
What?
I admit I had no idea what that was. Do you guys want to guess, just based on the name, what that might be?
The
Oh,
mold
gosh.
board
Mold board.
Mold
of
okay.
least resistance.
Yeah, MOLDBOARD.
This is something that usually has resistance, but this mold board doesn't have resistance.
It has less resistance.
It has less resistance. Is it some kind of board on a rubber band?
Is it related to mold as in mold?
Oh, is it
Fungus?
molding for? Yeah, is it?
Or,
yeah,
or,
is it
or,
related
or
to-
molding. Ooh.
Oh,
like molding of metal,
I don't think so.
of iron? Like when the iron's really hot, they have to mold. Is it like a metal mold or a cookie mold?
No, my guess would have been
A
that it
Jello
was
mold. It's a Jello mold.
It's a Jello mold. It's for fruitcakes. Yeah, the Jefferson cakes were all the rage. I would have guessed like it was some kind of thing for like keeping cheese fresh, but no, not that either.
Oh, interesting.
Nope. This was part of a plow.
Oh. Would not
The
have
mold
gotten-
board is the part that like picks up and turns over the dirt that you're cutting into. It like rotates the soil for you.
Oh,
Yeah, and he made a kind that was better at like picking up the heavy, crappy Virginia soil, I guess.
I'm frustrated that I did not guess anything related to farming.
I wouldn't
should
either.
have been. I'm very disappointed in myself.
Yeah.
You know what? You shouldn't blame yourself for this.
Okay.
Yeah.
They should have really thought of a better name.
I mean, I think it's a pretty cool name. It's just not back then. People probably knew what a mold board was, maybe. But if you
Probably.
don't, it's very confusing.
Yes, I was confused.
Jefferson, he thought the existing mold board sucked, and in 1794 he created one that he said was mathematically demonstrated to be perfect.
Oh, some bold words. Perfection.
Yeah.
Mathematically.
Yeah, he was. I wouldn't call him humble. He won international awards for this thing,
Oh.
like a gold medal from the French Society of Agriculture, a commendation from the British Board of Agriculture, an honorary degree from the Italian Agricultural Society.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I'm not sure how many people actually used his designs, but I know that he refused to patent it. He told someone, "You will be at perfect liberty to use the form of the mold board, as all the world is, having never thought of monopolizing by patent any useful idea which happens to offer itself to me."
Oh my god.
So
Part
that
of me
seems-
cannot stand him.
maybe I'm
So
not.
pretentious.
Maybe there's a bias. I don't know. But that sentiment seems kind of honorable. I mean, it's like it's the polio vaccine or something. Like, I'm not going to patent it. I want everybody to get it. But in a way, it's kind of devastating because if he had patented it, he probably would have made a shit ton of money, which is important if you're like a shopaholic in perpetual crushing debt.
Mm.
Maybe he would have made enough money to actually emancipate his slaves, which he was never able to do for lots of reasons.
He probably would have found a way to squander that money too, though.
Probably more books. It would have just been more books.
I don't
And
think
gadgets.
I don't think emancipating his slaves was on his priority list, in other words.
Yeah. So his Whirligig chair, it could turn around so he could face his fancy gadgets like some kind of steampunk asshole. But he could never turn himself around to face reality.
Oh, that was deep.
Yeah. Let me pull this out and drop it. Hold on. I'm talking about my mic in case you're not watching this.
I know podcast mics make it really hard to be dramatic. They're really in there.
You just have
Yeah.
to hit it like it's dropping.
All right.
That's the mic drop in podcasting. Boom.
Boom. Yep.
Give it a slap.
Just knock it over.
Oh, wow. I didn't know about a lot of that.
Yeah, I had fun digging into it and watching that Downton Abbey clip.
That was your favorite part of your research.
It was.
And
I
then
feel
coming
like
up with
the most-
Miss Piggy.
Yeah, the most redeeming quality of Thomas Jefferson is David Diggs right now, I think.
Oh, yeah.
He's made him seem so much better in my mind, and I keep on having to tell myself, that's not real.
Right. The depiction of him, it's quite interesting how we're raised to think he's a hero.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, I love his relationship with John Adams and the letters they wrote to each other.
Yeah.
Because some things were just kind of like off limits if they were going to have a friendship. And I think they brought out interesting sides of each other.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he was definitely multifaceted, but
yeah, and so contradictory. It's hard. You can't wrap your head around him, really.
Yeah, he's really interesting on a historical standpoint, just because he doesn't fit in any box.
Right.
He's all over the place, and it's hard to talk about him because, on one hand, it's this figure of America and our country, but then he was so problematic, and and a lot of times people, for many years, historians just wanted to forget about all that problematic stuff. So now it's really interesting to see everybody trying to rewrite, revisionist history to tell the truth.
Yeah,
definitely.
I think that's so important. They can do a lot of good and a lot of bad, and you don't have to, ignore one half of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes sense. Like if you're you're going in this one direction for so long that is glorifying him, that you want to like correct that. Yeah, maybe there's going to be some overcorrection where people are like, we can't even talk about Thomas Jefferson before you get to a point where you can acknowledge like the reality and the terrible things that he did, but also different aspects of his personality and contributions and just, who he was.
Yeah. LeVar Burton, who is just the greatest human of all time, he said something and it made so much sense. Everybody's like, oh, cancel culture, we can't say anything. But he's like, no, we live in a time of accountability.
Yeah.
Accountability culture. And I'm like, that is so true. It's not that you can't say anything. It's just now we're raising everything to a standard where everybody has to face accountability. Because used to, it was only so many people in history had to face any consequences. And now everybody does. So it's
right.
It's not a personal attack, but yeah, it's important. I know, like in grad school, we had to talk about, and Monticello is one of the places we talked about how historians have to figure out how to tell that history, because so much of Monticello was built on the backs of slaves and, the atrocities that happened there and people trying to romanticize his relationships. And it gets really complicated, and they're doing a really good job because they're not sugarcoating it anymore. And they're
right.
I mean, they still got a ways to go, but I can imagine the first historian that had to rewrite that tour, to be like, like, how do you do that? Like, because people, like you said, are just, he's an American hero, and now they're getting mad. And
like Jefferson and Andrew Jackson both, like they're like Molotov cocktails if you drop them into a conversation somewhere on Facebook or something, because you'll get people with very different sentiments that just go off. And it's hard to discuss.
Yeah, I've seen your Facebook posts. Sometimes they get wild.
Yeah, I don't know who wrote those to bait people, but
I enjoy it. As soon as I see one, I'm like, drop down in the comments. I'm gonna read them all.
I remember being on a ferry to Catalina, and he was like, whoops. I was like, what are you doing on your phone? He's like, it's a shitstorm. I've started a storm.
Yeah.
It's just important conversations to have. And
but I love that accountability factor instead of I mean, first of all, it's not as negative because it acknowledges that like it's always been there, the racism, and it's always been there. And now it's time to be accountable, as opposed to it wasn't there and now we can't say anything because people are too sensitive. It's just coming from a different mentality.
Yeah.
No, it's been there and now we're bringing it up.
And last month I covered Alice Paul because we were talking about the Women's March, and some people brought up some interesting things. Is that she's the symbol of women's suffrage, and she did so much to get the right to vote for white women, but she did that at the expense of women of color. Right. So it's like, yes, she's a huge part of history, but she's also a huge lesson of what not to do. Today, what we're still fighting for equal rights for everybody, but it's like now we can look at her and be like, yeah, she had some good points, but now nobody can get rights until everybody has rights and stuff. So it's a way of like changing that perspective. You can't excuse the stuff people did, and you have to hold them accountable, but you also don't have to be like, oh, we can't talk about them anymore. You should still
Right.
learn
Yeah.
about them. You just
These
need
are steps forward. They were all steps forward, but it's,
Mhm.
you have to look at what they were lacking, what they were missing in order to move forward again.
Mhm.
Totally. And I enjoy looking at arguing with the perspective that these people were just products of their time and looking at, well, there were opponents back then. There were people who felt very differently.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just unanimous feeling about one thing
Mhm.
And we've
in
talked about
Jefferson's time or Jackson's.
We've talked about that on our
Yeah.
podcast before, just how that argument, wreaks havoc in our bodies. Because it's just like, people were against slavery then too.
Yeah.
People definitely acknowledged that it was not humane.
Mhm.
So that's not a new idea either.
Exactly. And a lot of the characters that were involved with, like Alice Paul, like I just had her on my mind, she felt horrible about it. So she knew what she did was wrong by forcing, women of color to be in the back of the parade, and she segregated everything and didn't let them in the fight. And then just some people can't decide if she did it on purpose politically, to promise, Southern politicians that we won't allow them to vote so that we don't upset you. So, I mean, that's possibility here, but it's like a lot of those people, you find out later in their diaries and their families, and they've written down like they had regrets because they knew what they were doing was wrong.
Right. And I think Susan B. Anthony had similar stuff going on.
Yeah.
2021 for me has been a year of health. I kicked it off last year by getting this test for modern fertility. And when I got my results, which was in 9 days, by the way, and I got to do the test at home, I didn't have to wear pants, I found out that I had some wonky stuff going on with my thyroid and my hormone levels. So I was able to print out this detailed report that was gone over by a doctor, sent it to my doctor, and I got a referral to an endocrinologist, and I found out like 1 in 10 other people with ovaries. I had PCOS. I also have some thyroid issues. This was a game changer for me because I knew what was going on in my body. I was able to make steps to make it better. You might be interested in finding out your general health. You might also be interested in finding out more about your fertility. Give or take how many eggs you have, when you might be going into menopause. These are all questions that are really important when you're making a plan because sadly, infertility is so incredibly common. A lot of times we have it in our head that we have time and it will be easy. And then when we get here, we realize, oh shit, it's not that easy. So modern fertility makes it so simple. They send it to your house, you send it back to them, they give you a detailed report, you get one-on-one consultations with people, you are able to be part of a community, you can ask questions. And it just gives you a little bit of peace of mind, and it gives you a plan to go forward, whether or not it's to get healthy or it's to get pregnant. And these tests can be expensive. We are talking in the thousands if you don't have insurance. And even with insurance, sometimes your copays are just ridiculous. So by doing modern fertility, you're essentially saving over $800. And if you use my link, you save another $10. So if you go to modernfertility.com/historicalaf, you will save $10 on your order. Again, that is modernfertility.com/historicalaf to save $10. You know what else has changed my life recently? Having a She's Birdie alarm. I go for a walk every single day, and I'm lucky that I live in a neighborhood that a full block is about 1.5 miles, So I do that every single day, and at the corner is a gas station attached to a tattoo parlor, attached to some weird pavilion thing where a bunch of people just sit around and I think barbecue. Not 100% sure what that is, but there's always at least 5 or more people sitting outside staring at me when I walk by, and it's giving me anxiety. If you're a person that walks alone, you understand how important it is to feel safe. And I had mace before, but I've mentioned that it's so windy here, I just was afraid to use it because I don't want it to blow back and then hurt myself where I can't run or fight back, and it's just like a whole thing. But having this alarm has made me feel more confident. I know that it is loud enough that I will cause a scene where neighbors are actually going to look out the window and be like, what's going on? Because I have been mugged in the past, and when I was screaming before, I apparently don't scream very loud when I'm scared, and that's a problem I hate having. So if you would like to have a She's Birdie alarm as well, you can get 10% off when you use the code HistoricalAF at www.shesbirdie.com. Again, that is shesbirdie.com, code HistoricalAF.
All right. So I had morbid. And listen, I could have covered some really murdery inventions, but most of those inventions are so heavy and have so much death. And I just don't have the mental fortitude for that right now. And I think those probably deserve their own episode, because I was looking at, the most morbid inventions, and those were things like the atomic bomb and gas chambers. And those things are so heavy. I just don't know how to navigate it yet. They're important to history, but also really
hard.
I
see what you mean.
Yeah. So I'm going to go a little morbid adjacent. We're going to talk about a really badass African-American inventor. And I'm considering morbid because it's just pretty fucked up, everything that happened around this situation, just because.
All right.
American.
Yay.
And like I said at the beginning, I also managed to mention 4 presidents just for you. So
it's amazing.
Oh, I'm excited.
I'm going to kick this off with a tiny historical detour. A patent is a government grant to an inventor for an invention. Very, very simple. And George Washington, our first president here, signed the first patent law on April 10th, 1790. The law gave patent holders the sole right to make and sell their invention for 14 years. It prevents other people from copying their invention and making money off of it during that time. The Patent Act encourages progress in science by allowing patent holders the right to make a living from their own creativity. To receive a patent, an invention must be a new idea or it contributes something useful from an idea that's already out there. And a patent can't be granted to something that has already been invented, but a patent can be granted if it improves on the existing invention. Patent laws are very complicated. I'm going to be touching on some stuff, but I'm not a intellectual property expert thing. Yeah,
I'm not a patent lawyer. No.
Patents can be granted to machines, products, devices, and processes, chemical compounds, foods, drugs, and the processes to make these things can also be patented. And so patents are really important to what I'm going to talk about. So just keep that in mind. But we're going to talk about the incredible Thomas L. Jennings. Have you ever heard of him?
I have not.
Thomas Jennings.
I don't think so. Did he make something called a Jenny?
No.
Then nope.
This dude is so cool, and I am so disappointed that I've never heard of him, so I'm really excited. So he was the first African-American person to receive a patent in the United States. So that's kind of like his original claim to history, but his whole life is just phenomenal. It should be noted that while Henry Blair is sometimes credited as the first identified as Black by the U.S. Patent Office, historians agree that Jennings was the actual first patent holder because they didn't fill out the patent, I don't want to say forms.
Like demographic information? Or
yeah, they didn't write anything on them, the original ones. Same thing, it's really hard for historians to figure out who is, women because it didn't say. It was just numbers and stuff back then. So Henry was the second, but his invention was a seed planter. So just so you know.
Ooh.
So Jennings was born in 1791 in New York City. According to The Inventive Spirit of African Americans by Patricia Carter Slubby? Either way, I feel like I'm saying that horribly wrong.
It's not a good way to pronounce that. I don't know.
I'm so sorry.
Yes.
She says that Jennings started out as an apprentice to a prominent New York tailor. His mad skills were legendary, and people were traveling from all over to see him because he was just amazing at altering and custom tailoring clothing for people. And then his reputation helped him later open what would be a very successful clothing shop in Lower Manhattan on Church Street. And he was so successful that at one point he had the largest store in New York City.
Wow. In New York City.
Yeah. And like the great inventors of history, he saw a problem and set out to solve it. He found that many of his customers were understandably pretty bummed out about their clothes because they'd get these fancy fabrics and then they become dirty and they couldn't wash them with conventional means because it was a death sentence to that fabric.
Oh,
so if you can see where I'm going.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So at this point, you had two choices, either continue to wear it dirty or throw it away.
Right.
And while throwing away clothes would have been good for him because people would have been ordering more, he was really upset to see people throwing out all his hard work. He'd worked so hard making this stuff for them. So he went to work experimenting on different solutions and cleaning agents, and he tested them on all these different types of fabric. And boom, he found the right combination and created a method he called dry scouring, which is dry cleaning today.
Nice.
Awesome. I was thinking it's got a lead there.
Life is funny. I didn't wake up that day I wrote my notes and been like, dry cleaning is going to blow my mind. But here we are. This is so interesting. So he filed for a patent in 1820 and he was granted for dry scouring, and the process completely done within a year. And this is 4 years before Paris tailor Jean-Baptiste Joly-Belin, I think I'm saying that right, refined his own chemical technique and established what many claim to be the first cleaning business. So a lot of times he's getting credit in history as being the first dry cleaning. But this was 4 years before that.
Oh.
And while people did object to an African-American receiving a patent, Jennings was a free man, therefore technically by law an American citizen. And citizenship was important since the law in the 1793 required inventors seeking U.S. patents to sign a patent oath that attested they were citizens. Since he was technically a citizen, they couldn't question it. And that's probably also why it didn't say African-American on his patent, because at that point, you didn't need to. While there were obviously some provisions at this time that would allow an enslaved person to possibly use this patent protection, the ability for a slave to seek out and receive or defend a patent was really unlikely. It just, the whole system was just set out to make things very difficult. Big roadblocks. And eventually this is going to become impossible. And we're going to circle back to that in a little bit. Slubby. Either way is horrible. I'm so sorry.
How's it spelled?
Right?
I want to take a crack.
Sluby.
Slube.
Yeah. Yeah, it needs an extra letter in there somewhere.
It does.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm right, but I don't want to be right.
I think Slooby. I would go with Slooby.
So that person writes that Jennings was so proud of his patent letter that was signed by the Secretary of State, which was John Quincy Adams. He actually hanged it in a gilded frame above his bed. He was just so proud of it.
Oh.
I just find that nice. So eventually Jennings married a woman named Elizabeth and had 3 children. There was Matilda, who was a dressmaker, and then Elizabeth and James, who were both school teachers. And all the children were incredibly educated. They were all very successful in their careers. And they also became very prominent in the abolition movement.
Oh, cool.
So Jennings spent the first money he made from this patent on legal fees to buy his family out of enslavement, his entire family.
That's amazing.
Awesome.
Right? And then a large...
Those are priorities.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, when you make money, that's a good use of it.
Right.
Yeah. And he was making bank, too. He made lots of money from this patent. He was able to take care of himself, his family, everything. And then the rest of the money he was sending out to fight for abolition. So he was funding all these groups. He would go on to found or support a number of charities and legal aid societies, as well as freedom journals, the first Black-owned newspaper in America. And then he was also influential in the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem.
How does this guy have time for all this?
I know, right?
His business. He's doing patent paperwork.
I mean, how long?
Founding churches? How are you doing all
Like
this?
now you can get like dry cleaning like same day if you like pay enough. Like maybe it took like weeks back then and he had a lot of free time.
Maybe. Oh, I do have a picture of it.
He's freeing his family, founding churches. Over how long? I mean, was this over the course of like 50 years?
The money part was very fast. It was the first paycheck, essentially.
Oh, wow.
So that's him, and then that's the invention.
Oh, how
Oh,
cool.
cool. It kind of looks like a tiny tanning bed.
It does.
For clothing.
Yeah.
I feel like those still exist in dry cleaners. I've seen those.
It does look really similar.
I can't see into the back of a dry cleaner. It's clothes everywhere.
It's so
It's just
fascinating.
clothes,
if you
clothes,
peek
clothes.
back there, you haven't seen like those large padded pressers.
No, I see clothes looking up. I see clothes looking sideways. Maybe I don't notice things. And this is why when I'm at the doctor's office, I wander aimlessly with my own urine. I'm just not very observant.
I don't know. I've definitely stood there long enough where I've taken a peek at some of the contraptions back there. If I'm not hypnotized by the clothes on the rotating
That's
wheel
the coolest
thing,
thing, yeah.
sometimes I get hypnotized by that. And I'm like, whoa, look at it go.
That's true. I think the only thing I actually take to the dry cleaners is his blues for the military. So in 1831, he became the assistant secretary for the first annual convention of people of color in Philadelphia. So he's really just moving up there in this abolition movement. He was active on issues relating to immigration as well to other countries. He opposed colonization in Africa as proposed by the American Colonization Society and supported the expansion of suffrage for African American men. He was really involved in all these huge movements that I didn't realize were so big in the early 1800s.
Does it also kind of depress you that we've been working towards interracial justices that long?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's taking forever.
Yeah. The Reconstruction, there's so many steps along the way that could have been better.
One step forward there was still like 3 steps back.
Exactly. Yeah.
Most of the voting rights stuff, it was in the 60s, 1960s. That just blows my mind. And it's still, the whole system is made to make everything difficult. It's So Thomas Jennings died in New York City in 1856. Shortly before his death, his daughter Elizabeth won a benchmark lawsuit. This is insane. I cannot believe I've never heard of this either. I'm just so excited to share this story.
All
right. So on Sunday, July 16th, 1854, Elizabeth Jennings, a teacher, set off to go to church because she was an organist. She was running late and she boarded a streetcar of the 3rd Avenue Railroad Company at the corner of Pearl and Chatham Streets. The conductor ordered her to get off. When she refused, the conductor tried to remove her by force. And she was like, not today. Fuck you. So she held on to the window frame as he's trying to forcibly remove her, like throw her out the window. She wouldn't let go. She's just hanging there.
Why was he trying to forcibly remove her? Because of her race?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just trying.
It was segregated and she was just fed up and was like, I'm late. I got to get here. I'm done with your shit. And
this wasn't like Birmingham. This was New York, you said,
New
right?
York. Yeah. New York.
Wow.
So she's holding on, he's getting mad, and eventually a police officer shows up and she's ejected from the streetcar. She is injured by all accounts. Like, they were very aggressive and it was a scene. A lot of people watched it. So a letter she wrote about the incident was published in several abolitionist papers, and her story was also publicized by Frederick Douglass himself.
Wow.
She decided, fuck this, and filed a lawsuit with the Brooklyn court against the driver, the conductor, and the railroad company. Yes. And because her daddy had all that money and prominence, she was able to obtain best legal representation and hired a law firm of Culver, Parker, and Arthur to sue the bus company, and was represented in court by a young attorney named Chester Arthur. My next president.
Nice.
Like, how does she even... The connections, so many different connections. Yeah. And he was 21st president of the United States. And the case was successful. They won.
Gosh. Wow. Oh, that's amazing.
And the judge ruled that it would be unlawful to eject Black people from public transportation so long as they were sober, well-behaved, and free from disease.
Oh, my goodness.
We'll take it.
There's more, though. The jury awarded damages in the amount of $225, which is $7,094 and then 92 cents today. And then also $22.50 in cost, and that's $709 in cost today. So I feel like that's a pretty, not enough for being like
it's something
injured, but still more than I would expect.
And the victory in principle too, like that's
huge. This time in history.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This time in history, I would not have expected that.
Yeah, 1854 to get $7,000 equivalent.
And to change laws, about the transportation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the next day, the railroad company ordered its cars to desegregate.
Wow.
This is such a landmark case, and I can't believe I've never heard of it.
And what was the year again? I'm sorry.
1854.
Wow.
Yeah, they must not have appealed then. They must have just gone with it, which is smart and good on their case. But often you hear about these things just being appealed until it gets to the Supreme Court. But I'm glad it didn't go that far.
Yeah. And that same year, Jennings was one of the founders of the Legal Rights Association. It was a group that organized challenges to discrimination, segregation, and gained legal representation to take cases to court. Wow. So she just starts funding these organizations to help other people fight these injustices.
These similar,
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's amazing.
And a decade after this court case was won, all New York City streetcar companies stopped practicing segregation.
Oh my gosh.
So of course, it is the northern area of the United States. So
Right.
I knew that segregation wasn't happening at that point, but I didn't know why. I didn't know that it started. I guess I never really realized that New York was segregated to begin with, which I feel kind of ashamed I didn't know that. But
Yeah, I guess I didn't think about, when I think about segregation, I think about the South and I think about like the 1960s.
Exactly.
I don't think
Same
about
here.
90 years earlier than that in the North. It just, yeah.
exactly. It hadn't even occurred to me. I'm so glad I
Yeah.
stumbled on this. Jennings and his daughter had a hand in the effort to desegregate public facilities, a movement that lasted well into the Civil Rights era.
Mhm.
Centuries later, tragically, though, we're back to the patent. Tragically, the original patent was lost in a fire, which is
Oh.
such a tragedy. I hate it. So they had actually moved it along with 10,000 others, give or take, to a hotel, the Blodgett Hotel. I think that's how you say that. And they moved it there because they were building a new facility. So they thought, oh, we'll put it in this hotel. It's going to be safe. But then the hotel caught on fire. And even though it was located right next to a fire station, it was the winter and the cold cracked their hoses. So they couldn't put out the fire.
Do they didn't have a copy of this thing somewhere?
Like over his
No.
bed.
Probably the copy he had. But as far as the original from the patent office, they did not have that. They were able to save some of them, but the way they said it is at this point, they weren't cataloged by their name and issue date. So a lot of them had an X. So they're called like the 10,000 Xers or something.
The X-Files?
Yeah, kind of like
Yeah.
that. So they've been, all the numbers had an X at the end of them. So they've been able trying to match them up with some people, but they've never been able, as of 2004, they still hadn't discovered his or reconstructed it. And though free Black Americans like Jennings were free to patent their inventions, in practice, obtaining a patent was difficult and expensive. Some Black inventors hid their race to avoid discrimination. Others used their white partners as proxies. There's a lot of research. Brian L. Fry, a professor at the University of Kentucky College of Law, has been studying this. And he talks about how difficult it is to know how many African Americans were actually involved in patents, because you have, white people stealing ideas. You had Black inventors not capable of patenting, or pretending there's somebody else. So it's really hard to find what actually happened and piece that together. That would be really hard to try to figure out.
Find that trail when it's been hidden on purpose.
Yeah. And if a white person were to infringe on a Black inventor's patent, it would have been really hard to fight back. There's no power there. The legal system was biased against Black inventors, and the whole system, financially, everything was to benefit the white inventor or people stealing it. And also, you need capital to defend your patent, and a lot of Black inventors just did not have access to capital. So it's just tragic. It really is. And it's likely that a lot of slave owners secretly patented their slaves' inventions. In 1857, the Dred Scott decision happened, and it effectively denied Black Americans any citizenship at all. Because that oath required you to be a citizen to have a patent, that meant that this stripped any chance of Black inventors being able to get a patent at this point.
So discouraging.
And one case in particular kind of shows how all this changed. It's from the same year, so 1857, an enslaved man known only to history as Ned invented a double plow and scraper, and it enabled a farmer to plow and scrape both sides of a row of cotton simultaneously. Everything I read said it went from, 20, animals and people down to like 5. So it saves time. It was just ingenious idea. So Ned's enslaver was Oscar J.R. Stewart. He was a lawyer, a planner, and just like the human embodiment of excrement. Horrible dude from Mississippi.
Yeah, anytime you have middle initial, like more than one middle initial, it's a bit much.
Yeah, he's literally the worst. It made my blood pressure. Everything I read about him, I was just getting so angry. So he decides he's going to patent this invention. So the first time that he submits it, he puts Ned as the inventor. Because Ned was enslaved, he was not a citizen. Therefore, because of the patent laws, they wouldn't accept it. this dude is just the worst. And he starts throwing this big tantrum, and he starts writing these letters to all his friends that are in politics and have money and stuff. And he's like, quote, "This would violate equal protection if slave owners could not patent the inventions of their slaves." So he says a whole lot worse stuff. So he's saying that he's being personally attacked because he can't steal.
It's not equal. Idea. I can't steal their invention.
Yes.
Yeah, it sounds like the system is unfair, but not in the way that he's calling it out.
Yes. This guy had no clue. The entitlement is so bad.
White privilege.
Oh, yes. And he's so slimy. So he calls all his buddies and he tries again. But this time they're like, hey, the law is the law and you didn't invent it and he's not a citizen. Therefore, we're not giving it to you. So he throws this epic tantrum, throwing stuff, screaming, whatever. And then he's just basically like, fuck you, I'm going to sell it anyway. So he starts mass producing this invention without patent protection, but he doesn't care because he's making a ton of money. But he starts advertising it that it was made by Ned. The language is horrifying and I can't repeat it, but it's the most disgusting thing I've ever said. And during that time, the abolitionists had different angles they were going. And one of them was that slavery impacted the mental health. Well, they didn't call it that back then, but essentially it just stunted their mental health growth. And it was so hard on them. And it was like a thing, like, we can't let people be like that. So his main advertisement was, this guy, my enslaved person, created this invention. Look how smart he is. These people are wrong. So he was using this as a way to fight the abolitionists by like, look how smart he is. He invented this thing. And it's so heartbreaking because it was like the equivalent of a billboard just bragging about the atrocities he's committing.
It's weird. Like, I mean, why wouldn't he just lie and claim it all? I mean, it seems like he could have just stolen the idea and never even tried to credit Ned.
Yeah. And I'm sure most, enslavers did that. There's only 2 on record that went through this process and actually were like bragging about stealing it. But
yeah, I think about Phyllis Wheatley, the African-American poet. I mean, she was 7 years old when she arrived in the U.S. and when she was purchased, it didn't take long for her owners to see that she was very curious and like had a affinity for language. They taught her how to read, taught her how to write, and she became like a famous poet. And it was this panel of 18 people even had to like come and investigate just to prove that it was her that was capable of writing these poems. And she was kind of used in this way of like almost like a freak show type thing of like, look at this slave girl who has this talent, and she was still enslaved while this was happening. But yeah, it just reminds me of how some of the enslaved people were used for their talents in a way that their owners could make money off of, or like, oh, I found another way I can exploit them and make even more off of them, knowing that they won't receive any of it.
So this actually became a case. It was Stewart versus Ned. And in 1858, the U.S. Patent Office officially changed the regulations to reflect Dred Scott decision of citizenship. They're not citizens, therefore they can't take the oath. Therefore, there's no exceptions. Doesn't matter. Sources are weird. So this is why I'm always a huge advocate of always triple checking sources, because if you see something that seems weird, always double check. Because I saw all these sources talking about like, the Confederacy are the ones that changed this. And I was like, well, that doesn't sound right. Why would the Confederacy do this? So I figured out why. Jefferson Davis had a brother that had an enslaved man named Benjamin Montgomery, and he invented this brilliant idea for a propeller that replaced steamboat paddle wheels. And they wanted to patent it because they wanted to make the money. So that's why they changed the law. Because while they were part of the United States, they couldn't patent it. They couldn't profit off of him. But the second the South broke away, Davis was like, fuck yeah, I'm changing it. And they made it so that they could patent their slaves' inventions. The way some of these sources were wording it, it was like things didn't change until the Confederacy. And I'm like, well, let's back up a minute.
Right.
Yeah.
What now?
Let's not act like this is a good thing, because now you're just, taking advantage of these people again.
Right.
And then, although former barriers to the patent system were removed with the abolition of slavery and the passage of the 14th Amendment, which guarantees citizenship to anyone born in the United States. Studies show that Black inventors continue to face legal and societal obstacles even today. And this is from Bloomberg. Why can't I talk? Bloomberg Law. Quote, Lisa Cook, an economics professor at Michigan State, linked declines in African-American patenting to race riots and acts of violence, including the decimation of once thriving Black businesses. Communities like Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921, when the white racist mob killed hundreds of Black residents. Segregation laws also made it harder for Blacks to patent their inventions. The offices of patent attorneys were all white at the time. So if you're segregated, you couldn't go to them. You physically could not get a patent. Right. There were also commercial districts hindering African-American inventors from applying for any kind of help for a patent. Essentially, African-Americans found it impossible to fight for patent infringement, even if they had a white attorney and even if they had money. Even if you had the access to help, they still had it so locked down that there was just no hope. To this day, there's a gap between white inventors and minorities. Half as many African-American and Hispanic college graduates hold patents compared to whites at the same level of education. And there's likely a lot of different reasons for that.
Right.
One would be money. The cost of getting a patent can be in the thousands. And then you have unequal access to capital. So it's a lot harder, if you've ever researched redlining and how banks work and how the whole structure is made to make it so much more difficult. It's a lot harder to get loans. And there's a lack of exposure to the patent system for decades. The system for patents has not allowed minorities to even have access. So even now they technically do, it's still, there's no way for them to even know how it works. Marginalized communities are already struggling, and then you're adding extra barriers.
Right. And back then it seemed like they were much more blatant, and now it's like they're there, but in a more secretive way. And it's just passive aggressive.
And the people that are making it difficult are like, you have all the same things we do, but no. It's not. It's crazy. In education, not only is there unequal access to education, especially in STEM fields, it shows that especially minority students that enter STEM programs end up changing majors or they leave college. So it's a lot harder to get into the careers that lead to the patents. And Janaea Griffin, who works with consulting firms researching this inequality, believes that our society only celebrates inventors like Bell and Edison and Tesla. And she says kids aren't growing up seeing themselves in these roles. So if you think about I've barely heard of a lot of, African-American inventors. So if you're a kid looking for somebody like you and you're not learning about these people, what's there to inspire you?
You're automatically funneled into a different category.
Exactly. And I think that if everybody knew about Jennings and all these other inventors and they could see themselves being like, that'd be cool, I want to be like that. Maybe they'd be more inclined to go into STEM fields but if you don't even know it's an option, it really makes it a lot harder. And whatever the reason is for the gap, it's very clear that it's really a loss for society as a whole, because you're preventing so many people from access to do great things. And there's a really great quote from Petra Moser. She's a professor of economics in New York. Quote, invention requires a rare set of talents. Let's call them creativity, intelligence, and resilience. When you ignore the entire pool of non-white, non-male inventors, it's a huge waste, to say the least.
We all lose. We all lose.
Exactly. There's no telling what we could have that could be world changing, if everybody had access to what they need to make that. So just to end it here, despite all these barriers, African Americans, both enslaved and free, invented an enormous number of technologies, things that have just changed the world. So I'm just going to quickly go over a couple of more cool, badass people that you should probably know about.
Yeah.
So the first African American woman to receive a patent is a little bit more difficult to differentiate. Martha Jones of Amelia County, Virginia, is believed by many to be the first Black woman to receive a patent. Her application for the improvement of the corn husker sheller was granted in 1868. Jones claimed her invention could husk, shell, cut up, and separate husks from corn in one operation, And it was a huge step forward for automation of agricultural processes, which was huge for this country, especially since half of our country is based in agriculture.
Right. That's why I couldn't believe I didn't guess about the mold.
Yeah, it seems like most patents are for farm equipment, is what
It does seem like
getting.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what the manual labor of it, makes sense that you'd want to make that easier. To make it least resistive.
I mean, that goes along with the history of slavery and everything. And
right.
And for a long time, they thought Judy W. Reed was considered to be the first woman to have the patent, African-American woman. And her patent was the dough kneader and roller. But now they believe that she was actually the third after Jones that we just talked about. And then Mary Joan de Leon. I don't know if I'm going to say it like that. And she actually invented the cooking apparatus, which is the precursor to the steam tables we use in buffets to keep food warm.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's pretty cool.
Cool.
So
That's
of
very
those
helpful.
three, they're the first three, but the order is sometimes a little fuzzy. But the most current information does think that Jones is the first.
And what was the third invention? The
dough eater? What was that?
What is that?
Yeah, dough kneader and roller. So it would just be like I don't know if you made noodles where you put the dough in there and it rolls.
Oh.
Really not like noodle dough. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, a dough kneader. Like kneading dough.
Oh, a dough kneader.
Okay. I was hearing like dough eater.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
So dough eater, is that like something with like a parking meter?
Yeah, I mean, you used to have to have all your friends over to eat a dough, but this you can do yourself.
That's just my lack of ability to pronunciate.
No. That's our we think in terms of eating.
This is true.
So the next one is Benjamin Binnecker. I think that's how you say it. And he was a self-taught mathematician and surveyor. And when he was 21, he was shown a pocket watch and was kind of fascinated by it. And a friend actually loaned it to him, and he, messed with it and studied it. And eventually he built his own timepiece. So about a year later, he invented a clock out of wood that struck a gong on the hour and kept time to the second, which is really impressive. That's incredibly hard to do, I would imagine. And the clock that he built kept time for 40 years.
Oh my God.
Like, I can't even imagine
That's
anything.
durability.
Yes.
I can't even tell time sometimes. Let alone get things to work to the second. I mean, that's amazing.
It's incredible. And then in 1792, he completed the first almanac. He called it the Bannekers Almanac. And it was really important in 18th century because it told exactly when the sun came up in the morning, when it would set at night, and he listed tide tables, dates of lunar and solar eclipses, holidays, phases of the moon, and farmers were using that because it was incredibly helpful. And so he gave his first edition of his almanac to Thomas Jefferson.
Whoa.
Oh my gosh.
Little full circle moment there.
Interesting.
Nice.
That's complicated.
Yeah.
And here is
I have so many feelings about that.
Exactly. And it's going to get worse. So he called on Jefferson to give Black men and women equal rights and to fight against prejudice.
And
that was so, quote, prevalent in the world against those of my complexion, a race of beings who have long labored under the abuse and censure of the world. Jefferson replied to him, writing, quote, nature has given to our Black brethren talents equal to those of other colors of man. End quote. But it was still 59 years after his death.
Jefferson said that?
Yeah.
Wait. Yeah.
So he's like, I agree. You're so talented. I support this. But he didn't do it.
And period.
Yeah, at the same time, or a few years earlier, Jefferson was writing that he thought that Black people were inferior based on an invention of his, a scientific basis for racism that said that they smelled worse than white people, that they weren't capable of love or poetry, that Black men lusted after white women in the way that orangutans lusted after Black women. It was disgusting.
So disgusting.
And so the idea that he would say something about equality to someone just kind of speaks to his hypocrisy and lies.
Yeah. He said his talent was equal to his, essentially. It doesn't add up. I don't.
I think he was a mouthpiece at times, just like blah blah blah, whatever sounded good in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a shame too, because he probably thought that he had him in his corner and he was going to help them fight for equality, and he probably had no idea that he was just
Screwed.
Yeah. Because it was just in his lifetime, not even a possibility. It's just so sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is really disheartening.
So James Fortin was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and lived there most of his life. He served in the U.S. Navy during the Revolutionary War. He was captured and imprisoned by the British and was offered his freedom if he agreed to live in England. Fortin replied, quote, "I am here a prisoner for the liberties of my country. I never prove a traitor to her interests." It just breaks my heart, because this happened more than once in accounts where they get captured and they're like, no, this is my country. I'm going to fight for it, for a country that would never fight for them back.
Right.
And it's so infuriating. And after the war, he was apprenticed to a sailmaker, and he quickly learned the trade and developed a patent for a device to handle ship sails, which made him very wealthy. And he used his money to advocate for women's rights as well as the abolition of slavery.
Nice.
That's nice.
So that's a cool dude. And
that's
then we got
early too.
Really early. Yeah. Super early. And George Peake also fought in the Revolutionary War. He was the first African-American to be part of the settlement that eventually became Cleveland, Ohio. At this time, Ohio was largely an unsettled frontier in the western part of the United States. He invented a hand mill for grinding corn, and this was made out of 2 round stones, approximately 48 centimeters, 19 inches wide. And the invention was easier to use than the traditional mortar and pestle, and it ground it really smoothly. Although he didn't actually patent this invention, he received credit for it in the November 8th, 1858 issue of the newspaper Cleveland Leader. So I also found that really interesting. There's no patent that protected him, but people still gave him credit.
And he still had success with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, again, this is really early, and I was shocked.
Yeah.
That, people would give him credit. 1858 to
that's
actually
amazing.
give credit.
I mean, he really put his nose to the grindstone. Sorry.
That was a good way to end.
Can't help yourself.
Yeah. And there's so many more inventors, but that was just like a little handful. But
and I didn't know about any of them.
Yeah, me either. And I just...
Not everybody has the publicity apparatus that Thomas Edison does, because half of what he did was selling himself.
Yeah.
And that gets into the history books and it permeates itself in a way that makes you think he must have been that great.
Yeah. He was a marketing genius, and that was pretty much, he admitted that it was all about marketing. Because one time he invented something that nobody wanted. He was like, well, I'm never going to invent something that doesn't have a market anymore. He knew what he was doing. There's been so many more inventions, even in modern history, that were stolen, or they didn't get credit, or people accused them of stealing it from somebody else, even though they had the idea first. And it's just...
Wow. It's hard to track ideas, through history. It's really hard to track ideas.
Well, I'll let you guys go. It's getting late there too.
Yeah, this was so much fun.
It was.
Thank you so much, Kina.
Oh, you're welcome. Real quick before we go, tell everybody how to find the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
You can go to plodpod.com. We're on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're everywhere. Plotting Through the Presidents. Our season 3 is going to be coming up a little later this spring. I guess follow us and plot along with us.
Oh. Yes.
Yeah, that was it. I don't have anything to add. He covered it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll see you guys
Have a
next
good night.
time.
I would like to thank my guests, Plotting Through the Presidents, again for joining me. I had an amazing time. You guys are hilarious, and I always just have the best time hanging out with you. Definitely go check out their podcast. You won't regret it. They have a new season coming soon, so plenty of time to binge the first 2 seasons. All right, you ready for some shameless plugs? I got a new one. I'm going to shake it up a little bit. I am obsessed with coffee. It is my lifeblood. It gets me functioning. I drink coffee in the morning until it's hot, and then I switch to iced coffee. It's probably a legitimate problem, but a good problem to have. So I stumbled upon Bones Coffee because of the artwork, and I was absolutely obsessed that they had a White Russian flavor that had the dude, but he was a skeleton, and that was really the only reason I got it. And it turns out it's freaking delicious. And I had to buy all of them. And I did a bunch of little sample packs to try everything. Zero regrets. It's all delicious. And I loved it so much that I became an affiliate. So that just means that if you're going to buy coffee anyway and you use my link, the podcast gets a little bit of the commission, and that will just help keep things running, you know? So next time you're in the market for some coffee, go to linktr.ee/historicalafpod and click the link for Buy Bones Coffee and help the pod. And using that link will help me out. You know what else really helps keep this podcast going and keeps it alive? That'd be Patreon. That's patreon.com/historicalafpod. There are tiers from $2 to $20, and each tier you get more and more stuff. So a basic tier, you get extra episodes, you get access to the live streams where you can comment along, watch everything unedited, blooper filled, get to talk to the guests. As the tiers go up, you get things like merch, quarterly gifts, mail, postcards, you get to choose stories, get to choose the random word. There's just so much. Again, go to patreon.com/historicalaf to check that out. We do have a new perk. Listen, we're kind of obsessed with TikTok, and I kept on seeing all these people wearing crowns, and then in my depression shopping, I decided I needed a crown or two, and then it dawned on us, because a lot of other people on Patreon have crowns too, that we should just dress up, wear our crowns, and have a tea party. So that is going to happen. And the crowns are on Amazon for under $20. They're not expensive, which is very surprising to me because they're so nice. Anywho, we're going to just have a tea party. We're going to dress up, Zoom each other, and just have a great time and feel like the queens, kings, and the emperors we are. If you'd like to buy merch, that is shop.spreadshirt.com/historicalafpod. And you can also go to etsy.com/shop/Keena's Creations, and that's creations with a K, for things that are not on there, like koozies and beer glasses and wine glasses and the such. And that's going to be updated very soon with some more stuff. Stay tuned. You can follow the social media. That's Historical AF Pod across the board, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And every time there's a sale, like 10 to 20% off, it'll be on there. I need your emails if you would like to send in a story, a family history, town legend, a ghosty you've encountered, your favorite historical nugget, your favorite historical site. I mean, it could be anything. Send that into historicalafpod@gmail.com, and I will feature you in the next Extra AF. And if you happen to have a podcast or a business or crafts, wares you're selling, please put that in there too, and I would love to shout you out. All right, friends, I'll see you next week. My guest will be for the Love of History podcast, coming all the way from Japan for Inventions Part 3. Okay, bye!